right? Now, if I were to nail you down, which is impossible, in terms of the conclusions that were drawn from your investigation, which is at this point well over a decade old, what would those be?
Well, it's not hard to nail me down. I'm very resolute about it. I'm absolutely 100% positive that the individual that Tupac Shakur had sucker punched at the MGM prior to his murder, Orlando Anderson from the Southside Crips, along with members of his gang, sought and hunted down Tupac Shakur and shot and killed him. That's just that simple. That created a further intensity to the gang conflict that was already taking place, and Suge Knight decided to take it upon himself to retaliate for that act. Unfortunately, there was erroneous information, again from the media, that Biggie Smalls had been in Las Vegas at the time that Tupac was shot, that Biggie Smalls was the close associate of these Crip gang members that shot Tupac, and that Biggie Smalls had provided the gun that was used. That erroneous information is what got Biggie killed. That's why he was targeted. And so Suge Knight took it upon himself to hire his own hitman and retaliate for the murder.
And what were the details of that process?
The details of the process was that Suge Knight had reached out to a female confidant of his that actually was one of his baby mamas. And we refer to her as Teresa Swan. That's an alias for her real name. She then, because Suge Knight was in jail at the time this was happening, so she and Suge Knight's lawyer used the attorney-client privilege situation for her to be able to sit and talk to Suge Knight without being monitored by deputies, or she could speak with him confidentially, so to speak. He told her, go out, get a hold of this particular individual. He's a gang member named Wardell Faust. And I said, this is what I want done. Ask Wardell what he wants in return. An agreement was made. There was a transfer of money. And then Wardell Faust lied in wait for Biggie to leave the Peterson Automotive Museum. That's a mouthful. Peterson Automotive Museum, and pulled up alongside of him and shot and killed him. Both of these drive-by shootings were very, very similar in nature. The way Tupac was shot by a gang member is almost identical to the way that Biggie was shot by a gang member in Los Angeles. And this whole thing ultimately boiled down to gang activity.
What's interesting, and what a lot of people discuss surprisingly, is when Tupac was murdered, it's an unsolved crime, obviously, technically speaking. And this happens after a Mike Tyson fight in Las Vegas. Those two things are so inconsistent in the minds of folks, because the amount of people here, the amount of attention is just unbelievable to think about, right? Law enforcement has solved crimes that seemed unsolvable, and this is just unbelievable to think about, really.
Yeah. Well, you've got to keep in mind, people have today the idea that there's just cameras everywhere and that there's communications that are readily available. And, we're talking about the mid 90s, and, they didn't have the number of, for instance, traffic cameras at intersections. And even if you look at that old grainy security camera footage of Tupac getting into the fight with Orlando Anderson, I mean, that's the highest quality system that was available at the time, and it's horrible. And that's at a major resort in Las Vegas. So, technology was not all that helpful back then. Fortunately, we did capture that fight on video. But the location where this took place was off the Strip. It wasn't in this really crowded and congested area. It was off the Strip. And they unfortunately encountered one another. And the Crips just took advantage of that opportunity and that timing. And Orlando Anderson took the gun that he had been provided and leaned out the window and started to shoot into the BMW, and ultimately fatal wounds hit Tupac.